I've been giving a lot of thought to the types of videos that I've been doing, and I would like to sort of boil down different categories of types of the videos. One category would be identifying trees, another category would be climbing videos showing what it's like to work in the trees, another category would be on the tools. But I believe one of the really more important categories, I want to call it tree decisions. And the reason is that I believe that there's a lot of ignorance out there from tree workers and people that do tree work. They don't really understand why they're doing what they're doing. Now their bosses might come along and say, I want you to drop this crotch by 20% and head it back from the roof and raise it up so the trucks, but they don't really know what the trees need and why they're doing certain things. So what I'd like to talk about is looking at a tree and seeing all the potential problems as well as the future growth, so that you can anticipate what's going to happen to a tree. Now, I believe that this series could be very, very helpful to young climbers, young arborists, people that want to get in the business, as well as just anybody that loves to work on their own trees. But I believe that for a company, somebody that has a lot of employees, that some of these videos could come in very helpful for educational talks as well as safety talks that would be shown to a group of people and then discussed. And that, I believe, that's one of my primary objectives here, is to produce a series of videos that will help enable younger climbers or even advanced climbers that still are kind of uncertain what they're doing, to have a better grasp on why they're making these decisions. So this one's called Tree Decisions. I think you're going to like it. It's longer, but it's a good one. Chinese pistache, Pistachia chinensis. This one's almost done, but we've got a few more decisions to make. So the topic of today is decision making. Why do you make certain cuts? What is your reasoning? What is your justification? And Kaylin's up here now. We've only got a couple more cuts to make. And clearly, if you look at it from a distance, you can see that this is too low. But there's something else that I wanted to point out. And hey, can you point at that little crotch there on this underside?
Where these two come together, there's a bit of a bark inclusion. It looks like a crack, or it could just be a pressure inclusion. But certainly a weakness.
So what do you think? Think we should take off one of those pieces, or do you think that would make a long-term problem where some decay could set in? Do you think we ought to just lighten it up and get some of the lower ones? What is your decision here? What do you think we should do?
Well, I don't see any rot, and it's not a super heavy branch, so if we took off enough weight, as in this one, some of these lower ones, and then we bring in the long one there, I think in the...
Now what do you mean by bring it in? Just take a few tips back? Because I really don't want to see any tipping cuts on this too much. I think the tree is developing really well.
Yeah, but if we're not going to take one of these all the way off, I think we do need to substantially reduce the weight.
Okay, the weight is one thing, but a lot of times, one of the biggest problems that we run into is a lot of climbers see weight reduction as chop, 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 and they cut along the dotted line. Where really, if you look at the integrity of this structure, this tree has never been topped. It's never been shaped. It's never been condensed in any way. The only work we've done is take out the dead wood, the water sprouts on the inside, the crossover limbs. I've worked on this tree quite a few times over the years. It's been 4 or 5 years since I've done anything, but now it's a real basic, kind of a minimal job. But a lot of guys don't really understand why they're making the cuts that they do. They'll say, okay, well, it's too low or it's too far here, and they just think in terms of cutting it back to a certain level. But you really need to think about the integrity of the whole tree and what's going to make the best long-lived tree with the least amount of long-term maintenance. Well, let's get it done. Now here we're looking at it from up in the tree. Now it may seem kind of insignificant, but you got to remember that in time, this is going to be a big limb. So this right here is a structural weakness. This is an inclusion, where you've got two branches that are growing too close together. It's not a split, but when you have two branches that are growing too close together, they kind of wrap on each other. Now, if I was to say, well, let's take one of these off, then you've got a big area right here that's going to lead into decay into this area, and in the future that will be the demise of all of this. So I agree with Kaylin. I think that the best thing we can do is let's take off this branch because it's too low, this one over here, this one right here, this one because there's three out here, maybe that low one out there, and a bit of weight out there. So lots of little side cuts rather than stubbing back, and we'll have to look at it again in another 4 or 5 years to see what happens.
So, that one there.
Now I'd take that low one.
Yeah, I will.
Lighten it up first.
Because I can't fit my blade in that way. Cut off the end there, get the weight off. Then you can come under here and get it. If I were to do this at the beginning, it would have pinched my saw. There we go.
Very nice, no tears.
Careful. This one here is pretty heavy, so I'll cut it back from here to start.
Yeah, also that one just hangs too low.
Don't want to tear up here, so now that it's light, I can get in here. Get a little closer than that.
To retain the branch bark collar. There's a big difference between a stub and a flush cut. There's a right spot to make the cuts.
I like to grab the branch like this if I can, just to prevent any tearing.
It's a thin bark tree, so it rips quite easily. If you keep cutting all the way through and pull down on it, then it's going to strip out the bark. That looks better already. I'd do just a few more small cuts out there just to lighten the load on all of those. Might need to move the ladder. Now street trees are a little bit different. They have a certain requirement. It's a height. They must be high enough so that trucks are not going to hit them, especially the fire trucks, and the city will mandate it. And a lot of times their way of doing that is to come along and say, well, this branch is going to be a problem in the future, just cut it off right here and make a big cut. And they just kind of go along and just with a chainsaw make lots and lots of big cuts. But if you can offset that by making lots of appropriate cuts and keep the integrity of the structure intact without opening up any large wounds down here. See, I'm a real strong proponent of not doing this whenever possible. Now, this was a pretty sizable cut. That was about a 4-inch cut that was made years ago. Clearly it was done by the city just to cut it out because it was into the road. But eventually this area underneath here is going to develop some decay. It's already getting a little bit soft. I can feel it in there. And a lot of people say it's healing. Well, no, what it's doing is it's compartmentalizing. It's growing around the wound. So whenever possible, large wounds, if you know it's going to be a problem in the future and it's a young tree, do it when it's young. So it's a pencil-sized cut that'll just absorb that real easily. Now, weak crotches are something that you have to pay attention to. If you have a very tight crotch that is a weakness that could be potentially leading to a future crack. It's hard to see here, but there's a line right through there. See if I can focus that a little bit better. It's kind of hard to see. So you make your decision on how heavy is that limb. And if you look up, there's not a lot of weight on it. It's pretty much straight up and down. There isn't anything that's pulling it out. So while it's a problem, I think it's probably safe enough for the time being. And let's just put it on the checklist to look at it every couple of years. Sometimes you have little catch pockets, areas where debris and stuff will catch inside here. And that's something else to pay attention to. The best crotches are the ones that have a little bit of a wide stance to them, wide shape to them. If they're real tight, then this one and this one will grow together and they will get a split formed because of the mass will just push each other apart. Now I've also got 3 birch trees in the yard. Birch trees are one of the most sensitive trees. They decay very, very quickly. And you have to look very carefully to see what you're getting yourself into. So what I see down here is a big problem. I need to get a stick to see how deep that is. Really valuable tool, a stick. You can learn a lot with a stick. Let's see how far in it goes. Okay, that is not good at all. And if I had not stopped and looked closely, I could have just walked right on by that and not thought twice about it. But clearly, look at all that debris that's coming out of there, and I've only just begun. Oh yeah, it's bad. There's very little taper down here. There's some mushrooms right here. I don't believe that's armillaria. You know what kind of mushroom that is, Trent? Or Kalen?
Yeah, those are Coprinus micaceus, the mica caps.
Okay, and tell me about it.
I don't believe they're parasitic. I do think they grow on old rotten roots. I see them in overwatered lawns a lot.
Yeah, but it's not as bad as, say, armillaria.
No, I don't believe so.
One thing you got to be careful of when you see mushrooms, you have to really clearly identify the species of mushroom, because a lot of mushrooms are what are known as saprophytic mushrooms, and they are indicators of extreme weakness or extreme root decay. And if you had a big bloom of lots of the armillaria, malaya mushrooms around the base of the tree, that could be an indicator that the tree is much worse than you believe. So just from what I found here, I think I have to condemn this tree. Yeah, check this out. Let's look at the other tree. There's a little opening here. Oh God, it goes way in. That's pretty bad too. Oh, look at that. I hate to say it, but I think maybe what we ought to do is tell them that all 3 of these trees need to go. That one over there may be a little bit better, but if they've got so much root decay or internal decay, this might be a big problem all the way around.
Doesn't have any visible holes.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Found something, huh? Hey, you want a stick?
It's soft, but not totally hollow.
And this tree's probably the best of the 3. Unfortunately, they planted it as a grouping. Each tree grows off on the side, and this tree by itself, hopefully it's, well, I can tell them, but I think that this one's really got to go as well.
This one's very hollow.
Yeah, they'll need a permit on that one.
All right, check it out. Come film this too.
What do you say?
Here's an indicator that the decay is actually further and more extensive than we thought.
Oh,
This here looks...
That's a fungus.
Yeah, it actually looks like Ganoderma.
First stages of Ganoderma.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this.
Yep, there's some more in there.
Yeah, see that little white bit of fungus that's developing in there? Just this whole area looks like it got impacted at one time, and I'll bet you it's soft under here. The bark is still sound, but if you really have to learn how to read a tree. You have to look for the potential areas of weakness, because if it's got a covering of bark all the way over it, you really don't know what's going on underneath unless you can find these little indicators.
This whole depression here, there's an old wound right here and a whole depression here that seems to be a little weepy.
Yeah.
There's probably some substantial rot down in there.
Yeah, I think that one's got to go too.
And the way that it's leaning right onto the neighbor's house, if it goes, is not ideal.
That's where they park their car.
Yeah. Probably a nice Tesla or something around here.
Probably. Now, wintertime is a really good time to look at the structure of deciduous trees. And one thing that you can really tell is if a tree has been topped in the past. Because a lot of times you can see where somebody made some harsh cuts, and the new growth are these long straight shoots that go to the sky that are often associated with old wounds. And if you understand the European white birch, it is a species of tree that when it's cut harshly, it decays and rots down through the trunk a long ways. Now the tree can stay alive and it's growing on the side, but it becomes kind of a race between the trunk hollowing out and leading all the way down, sometimes all the way to the base of the tree, or creating such a weakness that the new growth that's much, much taller is attached to an area that can't support the weight of the new foliage. Come springtime, this tree's going to leaf out. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. But there's structural defects down low that you've got to make some wise decisions on. So I've just knocked on the door of the client and I'm going to give him the bad news about this tree over on the left. So it's a threesome. It breaks my heart, but safety-wise, they've both got to go. This one over here, I don't know. We might find some problems up on top too.